Hello there, and welcome to a project video where you will build a full-fledged Firebase chat application with social authentication, including Google and Facebook using Firebase, online statuses, great design and functionality, image support, sound notifications, the ability to create multiple rooms, and much more. This chat app is even better than the first chat application video I've created. I've listened to every single one of your comments and added all of the features that you requested. In this video, you'll learn React routing, social auth, Firebase, React Context API, and how we can use it to link user state between various pages within React Router, chat engine, use of environment variables, and a lot of third-party APIs. Keep watching and I'll teach you how you can build this amazing chat application in just one video completely for free. In the end, we'll also deploy the chat app so that you can share it with your friends and put it on your portfolio. If you'd like more project-based videos while the intro is rolling, just scroll down a bit and leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Before we begin with the development, please allow me to give you a quick demo of the application. Starting with the social login, you can use either your Google or your Facebook account to instantly sign in. Let's go ahead and try Google. And we are in. As you can see, we have a fully customizable chat application with multiple rooms such as Party, Hockey Club, and UniChat Tutorial. We can view the entire chat feed with messages and images, see the people in the chat and their statuses. This chat application tutorial focuses on connecting Firebase, which is a well-known Google Auth service and an online database, to Chat Engine. Chat Engine works incredibly well with Firebase. Interesting thing about Firebase is that everybody using it wants to save time and get a reliable quality feature in a short amount of time. Google will handle a lot of responsibilities for you so that you have a trustworthy app in the respect to authentication. The thing about Chat Engine is that it has the exact same value proposition in respect to chat. You can rely on Chat Engine to have a scalable, reliable, feature-rich chat that gets better over time, and you can save your time by focusing on features that matter to you. With merging Firebase and Chat Engine, you'll be able to get a really great login with great chat together, which will help you make amazing apps. That's what you'll be learning in this tutorial. On another note, I'm sure that some of you watching this video also watched my MERN Memories project, and a lot of you guys requested me to add a real-time chat application there as well. If you'd like me to create a video where I teach you how to add a chat to any existing application, such as MERN Memories project, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. If this video reaches 5,000 to 10,000 likes, we are recording it. For now, enough talking. Let's start building our chat app. We're going to start with the boilerplate code. This is just a basic Create React App folder, but with a few small adjustments to make your life easier when starting this project. To get to this page, click the starter link in the description of this video. When you're here, go to this code button and simply download it as a zip. Once that is done, let's locate your zipped file and extract it here. That's going to give us a folder which you can drag and drop into your code editor of choice. In this case, I'll be using Visual Studio Code. We can expand it, make this just a bit bigger, and then finally we can open up a terminal by going to View, and then finally Terminal. The first thing we have to do is run npm or yarn install. This is going to install all the necessary dependencies that I've prepared for you in this package.json. If we take a look what's in there, you can see that we have some design icons. We also have Axios for making API calls, of course React and React DOM as well, and most importantly, React Chat Engine for our entire chat application. That's going to be it when it comes to our dependencies, and now we can expand this once again, and let's just wait for it to be done. This took a bit more time than usual because we have a few large dependencies in there, but with that said, we can finally run npm start, which is going to start our application on localhost 3000. If you open it up, you'll see that it's completely empty. We can start adding some code right now. Let's check the files that we currently have in here. We have a really basic index.js file where we're just importing the app.js from components and the index.css file. Besides that, we only have a components folder with the app.js file. Inside of here, I just prepared a few imports from React Router DOM. If you haven't heard about React Router DOM, it is a library that allows you to have multi-page applications using React. In here, we just imported browser router as router, the switch component, and the route component. In here, you can see imports for a few components that we're going to use later on. But let's see what do we have right in here. We have one div, and then inside of that div, we have a router component. Later on, we're going to wrap everything with the auth provider, which is going to be coming from React Context API. And then finally, inside of our router, we have a switch component. Switch is saying, render one of the routes that we can see right now. So we're either going to render the login form or we're going to render the chats component. So first things first, let's create the login component. I'm going to uncomment this. And then finally, I'm going to comment out the chats component for now. We only want to focus on the login. In terms of React Router, what's happening here is we're saying on path just / render the component login. Of course, that component has to exist, so we're going to uncomment this import here, saying import login from /login, and therefore we have to create a new component in the components folder. That component is going to be called login.js. Inside of our login, we're going to import React from React. And while we're importing stuff, let's also import a few icons. So we can import Google outlined like this, and also Facebook outlined. These icons are coming from add and design / icons. Finally, let's create our functional component. So we can do const login is going to be equal to a functional component. And then just at the end, we can do export default login. What are we going to have in this login component? Well, for now, let's create the return. And then in there, we're going to have the JSX for our form with our two buttons, the Facebook and the Google login. I see that I have an extra O right there, so that's fixed. And let's check it out. We are first going to create a div, and that div is going to have an ID equal to login-page. I've prepared all of the index.css styles for you. There aren't many though. We're changing the font, we're modifying the chats page to make it positioned, there are some modifications to the navbar, logo, and so on. But of course, if you want to modify it, you can go into this index.css file and change the styles yourself. For now, the only thing you need to know is that we have to use these IDs and classes just to be able to style those components. Inside of this login page div, we're going to have yet another div. This div is going to have an ID equal to login-card. Inside of our login card, we're going to have an h2 component, and we're going to simply say, welcome to UniChat. I called it UniChat because it kind of unifies Firebase, Chat Engine, Google, and Facebook, so everything is in Unity. Below this h2, we're going to create a div, and that div is going to have some classes. I'm going to expand this into multiple rows because later on we'll want to add some new features here, but for now, let's just say class name is equal to login-button and Google. Finally, inside of there, we want to call our Google outlined component by simply saying Google outlined and self-closing it. And after that, we can say sign in with Google. Below that, we can add two break tags by saying BR and calling it as a self-closing tag. And then below that, we're going to copy this entire div, right here, and we're going to change this from saying Google to saying Facebook. Of course, we have to change Google outlined to Facebook outlined. And at the end, we have to change this from Google to Facebook. Of course, I'm missing an O right there as well. Let's save it and check it out in the browser. This is already starting to look like something. Well, not like something, this already looks like a great form with 2 buttons. But those buttons for now are not functional. If you click them, nothing's gonna happen. So now let's focus on creating our Firebase application, connecting it to our chat, and making the authentication work. To add these great functionalities, we of course have to set up our Firebase account and create a Firebase application. You can go to firebase.google.com, and then if you're not logged in yet, log in. But if you are, just click Go to Console on the top right. That's going to bring you to your Firebase projects. As you can see, I have a few auth demos, a unit chat test, and finally, we're going to create a final project that's going to be our unit chat. It's going to give you your unique ID, and let's click Continue. It's gonna ask you if you want to enable Google Analytics, but we don't need that for now, so I'm just gonna toggle it off and click Create Project. It took a few seconds, but our project is ready and we can click Continue. There is a sidebar on the left side where you'll be able to see most of the options. You can expand the sidebar by clicking this arrow. And let's first go to the settings of our project overview by clicking this and then going to Project Settings. Inside of here, you'll see your project name, project ID, and the number. But what we need to do for now is scroll down, and then in here, you need to create a new web application by clicking this icon. We need to enter our app name, we can use UniChat, and then also set up Firebase hosting for this app, just toggle that on and click Register App. It's going to take a few seconds and then you'll be greeted with this. You don't need this part of the code because we're doing everything with React, so you can simply click Next. This part is also done for us, so we can click Next. In here, we can see Firebase login and Firebase deploy, but we don't need that for now, so we're just going to continue to the console. Once that is done, still on Project Settings General, when you scroll down, you should see your UniChat web app. And then right there, you'll see that we have the SDK setup and configuration. You want to go to the config part of it. This is going to give us the config object that you can use inside of your code. So I'm going to copy this configuration, go back to our project, close all the files, and then next to our components folder, I'm going to create a new file called firebase.js. Inside of here, we can import Firebase from, and that's going to be Firebase/app. This resides in our node modules. We install that using npm. Then below that, we're also going to import Firebase/auth. Now that we have those two things, we're going to paste in our object, Firebase config, and instead of simply declaring it, we're going to export it as the auth object. So we can remove this right there, and we can say export const auth is equal to Firebase.initialize app. And then you call that as a function, and we're going to pass this object in. Finally, we're going to chain one more function call onto the initialize app. That's going to be .auth, and we call it as a function. Now we're exporting the auth created by Firebase that includes all of our API keys, project IDs, auth domains, and messaging sender IDs. Now let's save that and add Google and Facebook to our Firebase application. If we go back to our Firebase website, on the left side under Build, you'll see Authentication. You'll be greeted with this page and simply click Get Started. You're provided with a ton of options that you can use to sign into your application. In this case, we'll be using Google and Facebook, but the process should be really straightforward for all the other methods as well. So let's go ahead and get started with Google. Let's simply click on this. And then inside of here, let's click Enable. It's gonna give you your project ID. You also have to enter your project support email, which is just any random email that you have. Once you do that, you can simply click Save. It took just a moment to save. Having Google Auth was incredibly easy, and that's because Google actually owns Firebase, so it makes sense that they made it so easy to integrate. Now, let's try to enable Facebook. You can click Facebook and then click Enable. To enable Facebook Auth, you'll have to go to developers.facebook.com. The link is going to be down in the description. Once you're on this page, you can go to the top right and click My Apps. As you can see, I was testing with a few apps right there, but let's create a new one for this project. It's going to ask you which permissions do you need. We simply need consumer features like permissions and Facebook login. So let's select it and click Continue. I'm gonna say UniChat Messenger. It's going to ask you for a contact email as well. Once you enter that, you can click Create App. Once you're in there, you can see that the third card right there is Facebook login, so let's click Set Up. It's going to ask you for which platform do you want to set it up. We are using web. It's going to ask you for your URL of the site. For now, we can use localhost 3000 since we're testing locally. Click Save and click Continue. Now we're doing everything using Firebase, so we can simply skip all of these codes. Click Next, Next one more time, Next one more time, and finally, that's going to be it. Our Facebook login is set up. On the left side, you should see Products, Facebook login, and simply click Settings. The only thing you have to do inside of here is fill in this valid OAuth redirect URIs. We can do that by going back to Firebase, and then in here, you have it. Just simply copy it and then paste it right here. Make sure not to forget to click Save Changes. Once you do that, go to your Settings, Basic, and then you need to copy the app ID and the app secret. So let's first copy the app ID, go back to Firebase and paste it there. Secondly, let's copy our app secret, go back and paste it. With that done, you can click Save and our setup for Firebase, Facebook, and Google Auth should be done. There we go, Facebook enabled. From what we can see at the moment, we've successfully set up everything. Now let's test it out. To test it out, we're going to go to Components, Login. Now inside of this login, we'll have to import one more thing, and that's going to be import Firebase/app. And one final thing, which is going to be import, in curly braces, auth, coming from /Firebase. Remember, this is the auth configuration object that we're exporting from right in here. Now that we have those two things, remember that I said we're gonna add something more to these divs. So let's go ahead and do that. We have to add an onClick to this div, and we can say onClick. What do we want to do? We want to have a callback function, and then inside of there, we're going to have auth.sign_in with redirect. So this is coming from that auth object. We're going to call it as a function, and then in there, pass a new instance of our Google provider by doing new firebase.auth.googleauthprovider and call that as a function. I know it's quite a long one, but this function will enable us to log in with Google. Now let's copy it and let's paste it just below for the Facebook div. Right inside of here, it's going to be auth.signin with redirect, new Firebase auth, but in here, it's going to be Facebook auth provider. So same thing, but just in here, Facebook auth provider. Finally, we can save it and check it out and see if it actually works. To test it out, let's open our console by right-clicking, clicking Inspect, and then opening the console. With this open, let's go ahead and click Sign in with Google. It gave me all my Google accounts to choose from, and then it redirected me back here. Of course, to be able to see the data that we're getting back either from Google or Facebook, we have to use React context. More specifically, we're going to create a user context that's going to manage all of our users' information. Let's close our current files, Open up the File Explorer, and let's create a contexts folder. So inside of the src, that's going to be contexts plural. Inside of here, we're going to create a new file called auth.context.js. Inside of here, we're going to import a few things. That's going to be import React, comma, then we're going to import the use context. We're going to also import the use state, and finally the use effect. We're using almost all of the benefits that React gives us using hooks. All of this is going to be coming from, of course, React. Below that, we're going to import something known as use history, and that will be coming from React router DOM. Below that, we're also going to import the auth object that we created, and we created it in the /Firebase. We're referring to this Firebase instance that we created right here. Now that we have all the imports ready, let's create our context. To do that, we can say const auth context is equal to react dot, and then that's going to be create context. Below that, we're going to create a function that's going to export our entire context. And we can do that by saying const, or rather export const use auth. And it's just going to return use context like so, and we're going to pass in the auth context. So we're creating the auth context here, which at the moment doesn't have anything, and we're passing it into the used context React hook. Finally, once we call this function from within our files, we're going to get access to the populated auth context. Finally, below that, we're going to create export const. This is the provider, and then in there, we'll actually manage the user's data. So export const auth provider, that's going to be equal to a function. And all of React components get something within the props. In this case, we're going to destructure it, and that something is going to be children. Most likely, whenever you're using auth provider, you're going to use React children. React children is simply going to render all of the JSX that you pass into this auth provider. I'll explain that shortly. For now, let's set up some states. We're going to have a loading state. So we can say const loading and set loading. Inside of there, we're going to use the state, and at the start, our loading is going to be set to true. Then we need to get our users object, so we can say const user. That's going to be equal to use state, and at the start, we can set it as an empty object. Finally, we're going to call the use history hook coming from React router DOM so that we can re-navigate somewhere. We can do that by saying const history is equal to use history, and we call it as a hook. Finally, we're going to set up the use effect. So we're going to say use effect. It is, of course, a function that accepts another callback function as its first parameter. So we're going to create that callback function. And it also accepts a second parameter, which is called a dependency array or dependency list. When things that you mention in the dependency array change, then this whole callback function will be recalled. We want to call our use effect whenever the user object changes and whenever the history changes. So whenever we re-navigate or whenever we add the user. In there, we're going to call something coming from Firebase auth. More specifically, we're going to say auth.onAuth state changed. So whenever the state of the auth changed, there we're going to have a function that's going to accept a callback function one more time. This callback function gives us the user data. That's the thing that we need. Once we get the user data, we can call the setUser and simply set it to user. Once we get the user data, of course, we can also set the loading to be equal to false because we're no longer loading. Once we got the user and once we're not loading anymore, we can of course call the history.push and then say /chats. That's going to re-navigate us to our chat application. Finally, whenever you're working with auth context, you need to have one value object. So we can create a value, and that value is going to be an object that's simply going to have the user property in there. Below that, we're going to return some JSX. More specifically, we're going to call the audContext.provider. That is going to be a function that accepts that value. So we can say value is equal to value. Inside of that context, we want to show the children components if we're not loading. So we can say if not loading, then show the children. Again, this and then syntax simply means if this thing is true, then do this. So if we're not loading, then show the children. This is going to be it for our React context. We are creating the context right there, creating a function that we can use later on to grab that context. We are setting the loading and user states, grabbing the user from the Firebase authentication, setting it to state, and finally using React router DOM to push our application to /chats. Now let's use this auth provider in our index.js, and I'll also explain where this children comes from. Let's close these files and go back to components, app.js. As you can see, we already prepared here the import from the auth provider. We just created that, so we can now import it. And once we import it, we can also uncomment it here. This really portrays the picture of what React context is. It is one big object that contains all the data, in this case user data, and it wraps all of the other components. In this case, we only have the login component, but right now we also need to create our chat component. So I'm going to uncomment this line as well and uncomment the import for the chats. We're going to create this right now. But as you can see, we're wrapping all of the specific components with our auth provider that then handles the entire application state. That's what's great about React context. Some people even compare it to Redux. They have their differences, but definitely React context is great for simple to medium applications. Now that this is done and that we uncommented this import, let's of course create the chats component. So in the components folder, we're going to create a new file called chats.js. And then inside of here, for now, we can simply import React from React. Below that, we're going to create the chats component. Const chats is equal to a functional component. For now, we can simply return something like h1. And there we're going to say chats, just like that. Finally, we can export default chats. We just want to see if we will be redirected to our chats component. If we save all the files, our app should be functioning, and let's take a look in the browser. And we can see our chats h1 right here, and we can also see that we are on localhost 3000 /chats. Now, if you tried manually navigating to localhost 3000, it's not gonna let you. It's just gonna redirect back. So let's go back to our code, more specifically to the auth context, and let's see why is that. We're always pushing to chats, no matter if we have the user or not. So what we can do is initially we can set this user to be null right here, and then finally we can say if we have the user, only then do we want to navigate to the /chats. So one more time, initially the user is set to null, and then only if we have the user, then we push to the chat. Let's save it. And now that we're back, if we go to localhost 3000, you can see now it's not redirecting us back. Now let's try with signing in with Facebook, for example. Continue as Adrian, and it redirects us back. Now, to properly view our user's data, let's create a chat component that we can then properly re-navigate to. Our chat page is of course going to be in chats.js, and we want to return something instead of simply returning an h1. Let's first import a few things, and those are going to be import use history that's coming from React router DOM. Then we also want to import chat engine. So that's the main part of our entire application. Import chat engine from React chat engine. Now that we have that, one last thing is import that same auth object coming from /Firebase. Now we have everything we need, and let's start creating the JSX of our chat. Inside of here, we're going to have a div. That div is going to have a class name equal to chats-page. Inside of that div, we're going to have one more div that's going to have a class name equal to nav-bar. And then inside of that nav bar, we're going to have two different divs. The first div is going to have a class name equal to logo-tab. And then inside of there, we can say UniChat. The second div inside of the nav bar is going to have a class name equal to logout-tab. And that div is simply going to say logout. Finally, below our navigation bar, we're going to have a chat engine component. You just call it as a self-closing component, chat engine, and then we have to pass in a few props to it. First prop is going to be height, which is going to be equal to calc in a string, parenthesis 100 VH, which stands for vertical height, minus 66 pixels, which is for the header. We close that, that's fine. And then inside of here, we have to enter our project ID. We can find our project ID inside of the chat engine's website. So let's go ahead and do that right now. You can go to chatengine.io. The link is also going to be down in the description. And on the top right, you can either log in or sign up. I just logged in, and as you can see, I have two active projects, but in this case, I'm going to create a new one, and I'm going to call it UniChat. The only thing we currently need is going to be the project ID, so you can simply copy it. Going back to our chat engine, we can simply paste our project ID right inside of here. Of course, it's not a good idea to keep your keys like this in your code, so before publishing this and deploying it, we're going to move this into environment variables. Finally, we also need the user name, and we also need a user secret. For now, we're going to simply put a dot in here, indicating that we have to grab actual username and user secret to be able to log in. Of course, one more thing we're missing is we're not doing anything once we click the logout div. So right there, we're going to have to add an on-click listener, and then we're going to call the handle logout function. Of course, that's a function that we haven't yet created. So just at the top, I'm going to create a function const handle logout, and that's going to be an async function auth.signout. And of course, after we do that, we also want to push to just slash so that users can log in again. To be able to navigate, we have to use the use history. So we can say const history is equal to use history, and we call it as a hook. Then we can simply call history.push and then simply re-navigate to just slash, which indicates our login form. This alone should render our chat application. Let's go back and check it out. I'm going to reload, sign in with Google, and that redirected me to /chats. As you can see, we just have an error message here saying your credentials are incorrect. Make sure public key, username, and password are correct. That's completely fine at this point. We are not yet grabbing the real social login, Google or Facebook data, and then inputting it into our chat application. Right now, we're going to use the data coming from the social Firebase login, and we're going to pair it with making API calls to chat engine to create those users. So we're going to mix and match here, use the data, use the chat engine, and that's going to create real users that will be able to communicate in our UniChat. So let's do that right away. First, inside of our chats file, we want to see if you're successfully getting the data from the context. To do that, we can import something known as useAuth. This is the function that we created in the use context. So we'll be getting that from /contexts/auth context. So one more time, let's check where that is. If we go to components, context, and then we have our auth context right there. And just at the top, we are exporting the use context auth context. That's going to give us all the data that we can find inside of this value object right here. And that is basically just the user. So how can we get this data from a different component into this component using React context? Well, it's incredibly simple. You just say const, declare what you want. In this case, that's going to be user, and you're getting that from equal to use auth, and you call it as a function. This is going to populate the user variable. While we're here, let's console log that user and see what do we have in there. If we open up the console and reload the page, we should see that we are getting something. We're getting some errors from Chat Engine saying that our username and user secret are not correct. We first want to see if we're getting that actual user data from Firebase. So if we scroll up, you should see that we have something. If you take a quick look at this, it doesn't look like a user object. But if you inspect it a bit further, you can see that we have our display name here and the email. And that's all that we need to know for now. While we're here, let's also log out and see if we're getting the same thing for our Facebook login. So log out and click sign in with Facebook. This time, we weren't redirected to /chats. We were redirected to localhost 3000, which means that something wasn't successful. Firebase or Facebook weren't able to fetch the data for our specific user. If we inspect our console errors, you're going to see that we have one post 400 error coming from Google Identity Toolkit. So if we open it up and if we see the network tab, you can see that we have a 400 error that says invalid IDP response. And let's expand this a bit further. Error getting access token from facebook.com. OAuth2 redirect URI is, it gave us this, and the response is OAuth token, and then we have the params right there. This is going to be a good little debugging session. That's the exact reason why I'm giving you all of this error info. I want us to be able to debug this together. That's what coding is. It's not perfect always. It's not going to be like in other YouTube tutorials where everything just goes in smoothly. Sometimes something doesn't work, and now we're going to fix it together. First thing that I would check is the Firebase Authentication Facebook tab. So we can go in here. We can see that our Facebook is enabled. We have our app ID and the app secret, and we have our OAuth redirect URI. So I'm going to copy this one more time. Let's go back to our developers.facebook.com. And then in here, we need to recheck everything. So I'm going to go to our Facebook login, settings. I'm going to remove this and paste it one more time. I'm going to enable login from devices, and I'm also going to enable embedded browser OAuth login. These are all some things that could have caused the error. I'm going to click save, go back to our settings, basic one more time. And then inside of here, I'm just going to make sure that our app ID is correct, which it is, and that our app secret is also correct. Looks like my app secret was a mistake. These indeed are the dots right there. I was trying to hide it from everybody, but I'm just gonna paste it right there. This is the app secret. You need to go in here and actually click it to be able to view and copy it. There we go. So now we have our app ID, we have our app secret. I clicked save. It says Facebook updated. And now if we go back to our application, we're back in our console tab, and I'm gonna click sign in with Facebook. And that's it. We were correctly re-navigated to /chats. And if we scroll to the top, we have this user object that has my entire email. Great. Now we know that we are getting the real data both from Google login and Facebook login. Now we have to call different APIs, more specifically Chat Engine APIs, to create chat users using those accounts. This was just a short debugging session, but I just wanted to show you that errors and mistakes happen to everybody. With that said, let's continue. Now, make sure that we are using the user data from the useAuth to create a new Chat Engine user. To do that, we're going to import a few things from React. At the top, we can import useRef, We can also import useState and finally useEffect. We're going to start off by creating a useEffect function. So just in here, we can say useEffect. It is a function that accepts a callback, and then we have a dependency array. Inside of this useEffect, we can say if there is no user. In that case, we can simply call the history.push and then push our user back to just log in, which is /. Of course, it would be good that we also return from here so that we don't go into the code below. Now, what do we do if we do have the user? That's the current state. Well, in that case, we want to make the Axios get call to the chat engine. So we can say axios.get. Inside of here, the first parameter is going to be the URL. The URL is going to be https://api.chatengine.io/users/me. In this case, we want to see if the user has already been created. Then as the second parameter, we can provide the options object, and then inside of there, we're going to pass in some headers. Our headers are also going to be an object, and then inside of there, we have to pass our project ID. So that's going to be project-ID, and that is going to be equal to the same project ID we had right in here. For now, we can copy it, but later on, we're going to store it into environment variables. Below that, we also have to have the user-name, which is going to be equal to user.email. So for the first time ever, we're using the real user data. And remember that user data is coming from right in here, our useAuth context. Below that, we're going to have our user-secret, and that secret will be coming from user.uid. Now we have everything to make the call to the chat engine users me. Once again, this is trying to get the already created user. So if we have one, we can immediately show the chat for that specific user. So if that is the case, we can call the .then method with a callback function. And in here, we can simply set the loading to be false. So let's do something like set loading is equal to false. Of course, we don't yet have that loading, so let's add it as a state field. Right here, const loading, and we're going to have the set loading at the start. That's going to be equal to the use state, and the initial value is going to be set to true. Now we're modifying that, we're setting it to false, and then our chat engine chat will load. But then what's going to happen if we don't already have a chat engine profile? Well, we have to create one. So just below, I'm going to create a .catch callback with a callback function. And then inside of there, we want to prepare all of our data to create a new user. So what we can do is we can say let form data is equal to new form data, and then we call it as a function, just like this. We want to append some things to it. So we're going to do form data dot append, and we want to append first of all the email. Our email is going to of course be equal to user.email. Then we want to go with form data dot append, and in this case we want to append the username. Set our username to be our user.display name. And finally, the last thing that we need is form data dot append. We want to append a secret, and that secret is going to be equal to user.uid. Finally, we also want our users to have an image. So let's scroll up, and then we're going to create one function that's going to handle our images. Just at the top, we can say const, and that's going to be getFile, which is going to be equal to async function, and we're going to call it as a function. As the parameter, we're going to get a URL. Inside of there, we're going to get our image. So to keep it simple, let's do const response is going to be equal to await, and we can use simple fetch to simply fetch as our URL. Below that, we're going to get our data. So const data is equal to await response blob, and we call that blob as a function. Blobs are usually any files like images or any other type of file that you want to transfer over in binary format. For now, the only thing you need to know is that this blob contains our image. Finally, from our get file, we want to return something, and that something is going to be return new file, and that file is going to contain a few things. First of all, an array with data inside of it. The second thing is the file name, and in this case, it can be user photo.jpg. And then finally, the last thing is the type of the image. So we can say type is equal to, and then we can do a string of image/JPEG. With that, we should be ready to call the getFile function just below right here. So let's call it getFile, and we're going to get it through user.photoURL. If we are successful in getting the file, then we can call the .then. There we get the avatar, and finally we have a callback function. We simply want to append one more form data field, so we can say form data.append. We want to pass in the avatar, and we're going to get it through avatar. And one more thing is the file name, and that is the avatar.name. Now we have everything ready to create our user. Of course, to create our user, we need to make one final call to Chat Engine API. The call at the top was for trying to get the already existing user, but if we don't already have one, in that case, we have to create them. We can do so by calling the axios.post. You usually use post requests when you want to create some documents. The URL is https://api.chatengine.io/users. That's it. So you don't have another /me. We are making that post request. So the second parameter to this Axios post is going to be the actual form data. And the last and the third thing is the object with the headers. So we're creating the headers right here. And the headers are going to include a private key. So you can say private key that is going to be equal to, and now in here you have your secret variable. This is coming from Chat Engine, so let's go there and check it out. There we go. This is our private key, so make sure to view it and then simply paste it right here. Of course, this is something that has to be totally secure, so later on we're going to put this into environment variables. Finally, if user creation is successful, then we call the .then, and we can simply set the loading to be equal to false. If the user creation is not successful, then we can call the .catch and simply console log the error like this, and the error is coming from here. Great. Now we're calling different APIs, an API to get an image, calling two different Chat Engine APIs to create or fetch the users, and now we should be ready to log in as a specified user. Of course, to finalize everything, we have to use the data coming from the context right in here. That's going to be user.email, and down below, that's going to be user.uid. This user is going to be undefined once we first load the page on the component didMount, because it will not yet be fetched. So to fix that, what we can do is add one if statement where we simply say if there is no user, or if we're currently loading, in that case, we can simply return a string that says loading. Now, if we save this, let's check it out. We have two small errors. In one case, I misspelled form data, and in the other case, I used a camel case. So to fix that, I'm gonna fix it right in here and right in here. And just before we go check it out, there are just a few things I noticed we need to fix. First thing is that the user returned from Firebase doesn't have a photo URL. It is photo URL with U, R, and L all uppercased. Then scrolling down, same thing here. It's not project I and lowercase d. It's project ID all uppercased. Now if we save that and go back, that's a nice welcome screen right there, and it's welcoming us to our completely finished UniChat application. We are using Firebase social login using Google and Facebook to log in into our chat engine application, where we are using separate APIs to create specific users. Once we're here, we just need to fill out the new chat form to get started. So right here, and let's do new chat. As soon as we do that and press enter, a new chat is created. We can see that we are successfully logged in, our chat is created, and we can start sending messages. One more thing to notice is that if we go back to our chat engine, and if you reload, you should be able to see that a new user is created and that a new chat room is created as well. That means that everything is connected together. Going back here, you can see that this email and image are being fetched from Firebase. So that part is done as well. Of course, one more thing to do is to open this in 2 different browser windows and test it out. I opened up an incognito window on Chrome and I'm going to log in with a different account. I'll try Facebook this time. And once I logged in with Facebook, we got your credentials are incorrect. So just to be sure that we can log in with both social media networks, let's see what's wrong here. It looks like our Facebook account was created with a real name instead of an email right there. So we could go back to our code, and then inside of here, instead of user.displayname, we can simply use email. If we now go back, you can see that our second user is logged in as well. Our first user can add our new user into our chat room, and instantly on his screen, it appears right away. So let's try sending a message. Okay, and it's there instantly. We even have the typing status. So if I start typing right there, you can see JavaScript Mastery is typing. That works. I can start typing again and send something. We receive the message instantly. We can also send images and everything else we mentioned at the start of this video. Now that we know that our app is working, let's make sure that it is as secure as it can be. We don't want to leave any private keys or IDs or anything like that public. We want to put them into environment variables. To do that, we can open up our file explorer and create a new file called .env. This file is not going to be inside of the source folder, it's going to be just in the root of our entire project. Inside of here, we can create a new environment variable that's going to be visible only to us locally. We can call it React_app and then chat engine key. Simply put an equal sign and then copy the private key from your code. So I'm going to copy it and paste it right there. While we're doing that, we can also take in our project ID, copy it, and then this one is going to be called React_app chat engine ID. Equal, and then simply paste it right in here. For these variables to be populated, you have to open up your terminal, stop it from running by using Ctrl+C, and then you have to run it one more time by running npm start. We can go back to our chat. Instead of this static string that everybody sees now, we can now use our variable. That is going to be React app chat engine ID. So we can simply say process.env. You have to put this into all of your environment variables and then the name of the variable. We are using that in 2 places, right here and just at the bottom right here. We need to have the process.env in front of it, and the last environment variable is going to be the chat engine key, which we're using right inside of here. process.env.reactApp_chat_engine_key. Now our app is secure and nobody can see our keys online. While building the app, I noticed that before I used display name here, but it should have been user.email even for the username. The reason for using email here is that we need all of our users to be unique. And emails are indeed unique, while usernames are not. With that said, let's check out our app one more time. And let's go to the final step, which is deploying the app to the internet. That way, you'll be able to share it with your friends and colleagues, and you guys will be able to communicate using a chat that you created. To deploy our application, we'll be using Netlify. You can visit Netlify by going to netlify.com, and then on the top right, you can either log in or sign up. Once you're in here, you can click Sites, and then just at the bottom, you'll be able to drag and drop the build folder of your React application. We can generate a build folder by opening our terminal, stopping this from running, clearing the console, and simply running npm run build. This is going to generate an optimized production build. Once the build is generated, you should be able to see a build folder right here, which you can then open or reveal in your file explorer. Once you have it, you can simply drag and drop the build folder into Netlify. In a matter of seconds, it's going to deploy your chat application to the internet. Before visiting it, we can go to Site Settings and change the site name to something like Unichat JS Mastery. Of course, feel free to use anything you'd like. I'm going to click Save, and I'm going to visit the URL. Signing in on the deployed site is not going to work right off the bat. Remember that authorized URL we had, which we set to localhost 3000? Well, that only allowed us to use this on localhost 3000. But now that we have a new domain, we need to fix that in Firebase. I opened up our Firebase, and I'm going to go to the left side, Authentication, Sign in Methods, scroll down, and then right inside of here, we can enter our new authorized domain. I'm going to copy the URL of our new domain, click Add Domain, and paste it right here. Now that we've added a new domain, we can go back to our newly deployed website, reload, and then click Sign in with Google. I chose my specific email, and it brought me right to here. Now to test this out properly, let's open up a new window and see how a friend would join our chat. On my new window, I'll try to sign in with Facebook just to make sure that that works as well. If you're logging in with the email that you previously used on your localhost, make sure to go to Chat Engine and then delete that user from there so that it can be created again. If you do that, you should see that we have a new chat. And now from JavaScript Mastery, we can add that new user right inside of here, and they should be able to communicate freely. I'm gonna say hello there, and that works perfectly. Our users are chatting in real time, and that means that our chat application is now done. Great job on building this from start to finish. You learn how to do React routing, how to use social auth using Google and Facebook Firebase login, React Context API, the importance of environment variables, and much more. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know in the comments what you would like to see next. To make sure not to miss the next video, turn on all notifications by clicking the bell icon. Stay safe, and see you in the next one.